Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Corrupt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1982 Great Depression era country drama titled Honkytonk Man. Now, Honkytonk Man was directed and produced by Clint Eastwood. The script was written by Clancy Carlyle, in which it's based on the novel of the same name by the author Clancy Carlyle. The score was done by Steve Dorff, the cinematography by Bruce Surtees, the editing was done by Ferris Webster, Michael Kelly, and Joel Cox. And the stars of this movie are Clint Eastwood, his son Kyle Eastwood, John McIntire, the late Alexa Kenin, Verna Bloom, Matt Clark, Barry Corbin, and also we have some special guest cameo appearances from country music stars such as Ray Price, Porter Wagoner, Marty Robbins. He has a pretty touching performance near the end of the movie, and I think this was actually one of the last projects that Marty Robbins did shortly before his death. And also, I believe she's a jazz or blues impresario by the name of Linda Hopkins. They also make appearances in this movie because it's just a full array of great soundtracks filled with old school country music. So, aside from starring in this movie, Clint Eastwood directs and produces Honkytonk Man, which is the story of a mindless drifter in the Depression era who travels to get a big break in music by going to Nashville, Tennessee, along with his nephew Whit, played by Kyle Eastwood, tagging along with him. Their hopes is to get their big break by auditioning at the world famous Grand Ole Opry. Now, the script was written by Clancy Carlyle, to which the novel is based on, and what drew Eastwood to star in this film can easily reflect on the similar upbringing Clint Eastwood experienced compared to Carlyle's. So let's see. Before his path to stardom, Clint Eastwood was born during the Great Depression, and during his time, he was helping his father pump gas around the rough roads of the West Coast. And like all performers, they all each had to work menial jobs before in order to make ends meet. In Eastwood's case, he used to be a logger and a steel furnace worker amongst many other jobs. But I feel that Eastwood took the role because in ways that may not necessarily work or that outwardly. As a whole, this movie was subtle, but an energetic feel-good film that never once presses on your luck. The film is refreshingly contrast to Clint Eastwood's normal tough guy films he's famous for. His son Kyle turns in an equally stunning performance as his nephew Whit, who's very smart, independent, and he never strikes me for being annoying or a product of nepotism just because his father is the star and the producer. He actually does play a very, very convincing role. And it doesn't really quite matter to me if he is the director, producer, star's son. He was actually pretty good in his role. He didn't strike me for being annoying or anything like that. He even seems to be, like the level headed, the kind of a bit of the conscience towards Clint Eastwood's character, you know. And the events on their traveling is purely secondary than compares to what happens to them in between. So yes, they're going to take a road trip all the way from Oklahoma to Nashville, Tennessee. Originally, Whit was supposed to go from his humble dwellings from Oklahoma to seek better opportunities as a cotton picker in California, but he decides to go along with his Uncle Red to Nashville, Tennessee, maybe as a way to sort of help him along the way because his mother, who was a little bit reluctant to have her son Whit tag along with Red Stovall, which is of course Clint Eastwood's character. And I think the name Red Stovall could probably be a wink to at the time the most recently deceased performer by the name of Red Sovine. The names actually sound a bit alike. Red Stovall, Red Sovine. Think about it. It sounds pretty much alike. But this movie, I think, is clearly almost loosely based on a biopic of a Depression era country singer who went by the name of Jimmy Rogers, who was born in 1897 and he died in 1933. So the opening scenes we see here has Red Stovall, played by Clint Eastwood, driving his old 1930s touring car as it crashes into a windmill and makes a return to his old homestead. Red has a very similar personification to the late Jimmy Rogers, who has often been billed as the father of country music. And he doesn't really actually leave too much of a lasting impression towards the rest of the kin, except for his nephew Whit, who seems to have great admiration and fondness for him, especially his guitar, which is, a vintage, old school, classic guitar. So not only is he an inebriated, middle-aged bumpkin, he is also like the character, like the real Jimmy Rogers. Red Stovall is also dying from tuberculosis. But, in spite of his drinking, his womanizing, and his nightclub lifestyle, that's also may have been a bit of a contribution to his illness and is not making his matters any better. In fact, his drinking and his gambling and his promiscuous ways is actually making him go from bad to worse. But is he gonna spend the rest of his life in a boring old sanitarium? Of course not. That his illness and his other red herrings in between him are not going to hold him back from chasing the dream to go to Nashville and, of course, to pay off several IOUs to several people. He's actually a very talented singer and a musician. He's just down on his luck and finds that if he auditions to go to the Grand Ole Opry, this might be his savior, or at least his swan song, as a way to break his lucky streak. Or if it is his swan song, he wants to go out in style, or at least having the attempt and the opportunity to do some recordings at the Grand Ole Opry. It may not necessarily be an overnight success, but he's not going to be deprived of that opportunity to fulfill his dreams, even if it was, and unfortunately I hate to give away spoilers, it is the last thing that he's ever done. Red wants to bring Whit along, even though Whit's parents are reluctant to do that. But after much thinking, Whit's mother, played by Verna Bloom, decides to let Whit go on his journey just as long as it can help clean up Red from his alcoholism and not to do any sort of activities that Red has been famously known to do, which includes fooling around with women and something that his mother made a stern note of. Joining them on their journey is an aging old grandpa which is Whit's grandfather, played by John McIntire, who, of course, wants to go to Nashville, Tennessee to reunite with some old friends he hasn't seen in over 40 years. The cinematography of the road scenes are definitely quite impressive, with all the remarkable landmarks out there, and we have a feeling of nostalgia and romance in the air. They take a quick gander at a gambling house, and there's where they meet up with a nonconformist young lady played by Alexa Kenin, who also wants to go along for the ride. She may not necessarily have the talent to be a singer, but she just probably wants to get away from the doldrums of her family life. And she has a knack for taking generic sentiments by adding some romantic prose to it. And although this is a bit of a sentimental story that's kind of depressing to look at times, but it's still handled in a way where it's not like you have to eternally get a box of tissue paper nearby. Alexa Kenin actually succeeds in adding some well needed humor in this movie. Yes, I know it's set in the Great Depression era. Yes, our leading character does not have very long to live. And yes, he needs to chase his dream before it's too late. But Alexa Kenin brings a refreshing breath of comedy to this film. Even though she can sometimes, maybe to others, she might probably come across as being somewhat annoying. But I actually found her to be refreshingly effective in some much needed comic relief. And the best, but still, the best scenes are not about her. The best scenes in this movie are definitely when they arrive in Nashville and when Eastwood auditions at the Grand Ole Opry and then the auditions at the recording studio. Although I must say he puts in a very good effort, his songs definitely have a bone weary vibe that doesn't hit the spot of country music until a backup musician kindly lends him a hand. Of course, there is some rather uncomfortable scenes during his auditions and his recordings, but at least, I was relieved that he had a chance to take this opportunity while he can. And, like I said, there was a very tender moment where Red ends up having a violent coughing fit and just couldn't finish the song that he wrote. So then the backup musician, who actually is a longtime country music legend himself, Mr. Marty Robbins, decides to sort of take over his spot to finish the song. And I thought it was a very, very nice gesture. What would have been better is if he and Red did a two-part harmony to just finish the song, maybe one last chorus of the song, and then call it a night. But still, I'm not complaining. That's not a quibble of any kind of sort. I actually thought that was very nice of him to do that, and I'm not a big fan of country music and stuff like that. But, I like to see movies about a person who's chasing their dreams and trying to make the most out of it before their time comes. And I think Clint Eastwood and company had did a very formidable job, and I really appreciate it. It was really, really well, effectively done. The direction was great. I also got to give a hats off to the cinematography by Bruce Surtees, who creates this dusty, drab, droll era that was the Great Depression. The real gist of this film is all about chasing your dreams and just turning your life around. It's quite surprising that the happier scenes are actually quite bittersweet. Honkytonk Man definitely has a lot of idiosyncrasies that makes this very special. It was refreshing that Eastwood took a back seat from his Dirty Harry image and make a character kind of more vulnerable than his normal domain. Sure, his violent movies can still be in your minds when seeing him perform, but the more he steps away from those movies, you eventually get used to the more upbeat projects he eventually would do later in his career. Movies like Gran Torino and Million Dollar Baby and Trouble with the Curve. He has a bit of a stake coming into this movie, but he's hiding it through the country songs he's performing for his audiences. And though he's not exactly, a great singer, I still appreciated the effort, knowing that, this man is dying. He doesn't have much to live. He doesn't have really much to live for. And I don't think he's like wants to become a country music singer for the money. He just wants to do it for at least one last chance at opportunity. He's not doing it for ego, he's not doing it for fame. He's doing it for an opportunity of a lifetime. And I think, this movie definitely really embodies that. And I highly recommend people to see this movie. Maybe it might be on YouTube. Maybe you could purchase it at a video store or, online. I would recommend you to see this movie. You won't be disappointed. Even if you're not necessarily a big fan of country music, I'm sure there's something in there for everyone to see. I mean, people whose grandparents or great grandparents who have experienced the Great Depression, you can get a first-hand look at what it was like. And believe me, it was not a pleasant time to live. And I think Clint Eastwood, Bruce Surtees, and company really, really put this movie out. And it was really spot on accurate. If I was to give this movie a score out of 10, I would definitely give it an 8. So I guess this ends my ride review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.